Well, we lived through the Great Depression, of course. That was the big event in our young lives.
Mm-hmm.
And Pearl Harbor was our 9/11, and that woke us up to the fact that we couldn't live in an isolated world anymore like we used to. And Herbert Hoover was president when we were very young, and he caused us to become both Democrats, which we are still today. Because he was a do-nothing like George Bush did plenty, but mostly harm. Anyway, he was a do-nothing, and we had a Great Depression going on, and so that's when FDR came in, and he was our hero. And he was elected 4 times, and that's an unprecedented thing. So anyway, the Depression was solved by World War II, I guess. All of a sudden, all the women went to work, and Estelle got a job, and I went in the Army. And we got through it. And we have friends here today that were in the Holocaust. Now here in the village.
Yeah, we have this neighbor who was, I guess he was about in the early teens, and he was in Poland.
Mm-hmm.
And he was taken, as well as his whole family, to a concentration camp. He just wrote a book
Mm-hmm.
about his experience as a...
Charles Pierce is by name.
Yeah.
And he suffered the Holocaust, and he gave us a close view of what it was like to be a young man. And Hitler and his group used them, the young people, to work. The rest were killed. If they couldn't work and profit, and they give them a profit, they were disposed of. He lost his entire family.
His youth was gone. I mean,
Yeah.
the only reason he's still alive is because they used him as slave labor.
Mm.
His sister and his mother and his father, they're killed.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well, that's our history.
That's our history.
And Vietnam didn't affect us. We were too old for it by then.
Mm-hmm.
And all the wars that have interceded in the meantime have meant nothing except loss of men and loss of money.
What was when, like, with the Great Depression? How old were you, both of you?
Great Depression, I was about 18 or so, 19. It affected me when I got out of high school.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't find jobs.
Couldn't find jobs. The Depression was like it is today, where there were just no jobs to be had. So actually, the Army was the first job that I had, really.
Mm-hmm.
I was a counselor in camp during the summer, and still had little work here and there. But jobs were very hard to find, and the unemployment rate was probably higher than it is today. And that was our history. After the war, things picked up. There were more jobs, and cars were being made. And I had various different jobs. Nothing had amounted to anything. I had trouble finding myself. And finally I went back to school when I was 40 years old, 38, 40. Graduated when I was 40, and that's when I had a career with Hughes Aircraft. I got into electronics. I went back to school and learned electronics, and that was our making. We were able to survive that. Yeah. And that was our history.
We had, each generation has their own little history to tell.
But World War II really took us out of the Depression and
Because
put people back to work.
Sure, they needed new cars. Our first car was a Packard.
36 Packard.
36 Packard. That was our first car, and
things picked up after the war.
Sure, Harry's brother used to sell cars. That was his business, and his other brother was a professor at Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
And
my oldest brother was a social worker and wrote a couple of books and did well in the social worker field. And my middle brother, we were 3 of us. My middle brother became a new car dealer and did very well in that field.
Mm-hmm.
And I had struggled for many years until I found myself in electronics, went back to school and wound up working for Howard Hughes for 24 years. Then I retired.
How would you say the Depression and the war kind of affected the maybe family dynamics when you were, because you had moved to California at that point, right?
When the war just started.
Your grandfather was a teacher, and a successful teacher, and he was a teacher all his life. So it didn't affect him at
your
all.
father.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't go into the war. He was unqualified because of his eyesight. And he became a teacher and did very well.
Taught for all those years.
Mm-hmm.
Norman too.
Mm-hmm.
Norman studied accounting, and he was in the air transport command during the war, but he never went overseas, but he was stationed in Newfoundland. And he lucked out in that he got overseas pay, but Newfoundland wasn't anywhere near the war, so he did fine, you know. Then he came home.
He became a teacher after the war.
Yeah, he went back to school, and he became a teacher.
And did fine until he retired. And he's still alive, living in San Diego.
Near San Diego. You see Norman every once in a while.
Yeah.
We don't see him that often either, but we keep up.
Yeah. How did Norman and Jerry meet?
How they met? I really don't know. I really don't know how they met.
She's 10 years younger than he.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really don't know how they met. It's from, somehow it's funny. I never asked them how they met. At the time they met, we were so busy with our own life that I guess I didn't pay much attention because we lived back east.
Mm-hmm.
And
they got married.
So you just kind of got an invite to the wedding,
yeah,
and you were like, "Oh, I guess."
Yeah, just about.
Yeah.
Yeah, just about.
And they married 5 years after we did.
Yeah, they married 5 years.
So everybody kind of got married in like
that was the thing. You see, so much sort of wasted time with the army. Young guys like your age went into the army. Harry was in the army for 4 years, so a big piece of his life was in the army. And if he survived, which he did, then you come home and you want to start a life. And since we were already engaged, you know, it was sort of like a foregone conclusion that we would get married. This is the way life was with most of us. When we went on our honeymoon, which was kind of funny because we took the train across, we went to New York for our honeymoon because Harry's family lived in New York. And the train was full of ex-servicemen, packed, crowded, and they said that civilians weren't allowed to eat. They didn't have food enough to give civilians, but the servicemen were allowed to eat. Harry says, if my wife can't eat, I'm not eating, you know. But it's a different lifestyle. I mean, now you get on a plane and you go.
Yeah. Speaking of, like, honeymoons and traveling, I know Shirley liked the idea of traveling,
Yeah,
and Maury did not.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I just know that was a thing.
Yeah. Shirley liked traveling. She loved going, and Maury didn't.
She finally talked him into it about 20 years before he died.
Yeah, they did go to Europe.
They did?
She talked him into going to Europe, and they went to Europe and had a great time.
Yeah, she loved it. She really liked going, and he didn't like going. In fact, when we moved here, we had seen this place before, and I had suggested that maybe they should move here too. It would be a good life for them. But Shirley thought it would be too, but Maury wouldn't hear of it. That house that you're living in, that was his, and he's not giving it up.
He wouldn't leave it.
Yeah, my dad has a similar sentiment. Although he enjoys traveling, but he says, like, the next time I move, we'll be in a pine box, like...
Well, it's hard.
Yeah.
And as you get older, you realize that how hard it is. When we moved here, we went on every trip. You know, they offer all kinds of trips here. And they're bus trips, but nevertheless, they are trips. And we went to Canada, we've been all over the United States, but Now,
In fact, when your
they
parents,
offer it, but we don't go because it's just too hard.
your parents were married in Boston, weren't they?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, his parents were
Yeah.
married in Boston.
Yeah.
We went to Boston.
We went to Boston. We went to their
Went
wedding.
to their wedding, and then toured the entire East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a good trip for us.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, this is just the way life was for us. You know, everything was exciting for us, but then again, it would be like if you got married, you know, you were settled and got married, it would be exciting for you, doing all kinds of new things, and that's how we did it.
Mm-hmm.
But your grandfather was kind of a stick in the mud kind of guy. He liked his home. He liked quiet. He liked the stamps. He was a very sweet guy.
Yeah, speaking of the stamps, they both were kind of collectors.
Well, Shirley collected dolls.
Shirley collected
He
dolls.
collected stamps.
And he collected stamps. They
Whatever
saved
happened to
everything.
His stamp collection, I don't know what happened to it.
Oh, it's still in the house. We've got boxes and boxes of stamps. We also have a box of Abe Lincoln stuff and
that's
coins.
what he liked. He
Coins,
loved all that.
I imagine it's worth some money today.
Yeah. We also, while cleaning out the house, this is my favorite discovery, we found a box labeled string too short to use.
They saved everything.
They did.
Saved everything.
Saved everything.
In fact, one time they sent us, you know, shortly before he died, they saved Sandy's birth announcement.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're long gone from me.
She's 62 years old.
Yeah, and they had her, you know, when Sandy was born, we sent the relatives and stuff the birth announcement. He had saved it. So he saved everything.
Your garage must be full.
It is. Do you think that sentiment is because of Great Depression, or?
I don't think so. It's just in him. He liked to keep and save. He just.
Well, he had hard times his whole life.
Well, but his folks weren't poor folks. You know what I'm saying? They
weren't rich either.
They were okay. They were okay, and they were able to afford to send 2 kids to college, and they were average. They weren't rich, but they weren't poor.
Mm-hmm.
Our family was much poorer than the Barrettys.
Mm-hmm.
But they were very,
His parents lived to be
when we met them, they were like very old people.
Mm-hmm.
They acted old. And Maury was raised by older people.
Like being raised by grandparents.
It's like being raised by grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they were his regular parents, but they just looked like grandparents.
Yeah.
Very old. Maury didn't live to their age, neither did his sister. His sister died at the age of about 60, quite young.
Well, if you get something like cancer,
Yeah, I think
that's a whole new ballgame.
She died of leukemia.
Yeah, but it's still, if you get one of those goodies, age doesn't make any difference. I mean,
And he died younger than his parents did.
Yeah.
He died about the age of 70, I think.
Yeah, around 70. Yeah.
So
Shirley found it very hard when he left, when he died, because she didn't do any of the bookkeeping or, you know, that.
He did all the bookkeeping.
Well, so do you, so I'm going to be in great shape.
I tried to transmit some of it to you, but he didn't to her.
Yeah,
She was lost.
I know where things are. I may not be able to.
I think your father is the one that saved her. He took care of her.
Yeah.
As far as bookkeeping and all that.
They were very good together, the two of them. They really were very sweet together. He was very nice. He was a nice gentleman. And
your father stayed with Shirley quite a many years too.
What?
He was a son for her a long time in the house.
Yeah.
He didn't. When he got married pretty late, as far as the average goes. I don't know how old he was when he got married, but anyway,
he was older than Shirley. I think he was 6 years older than Shirley. Shirley was like a 24, so he must have been 30 or a little over.
So she lived quite a number of years after he died.
Oh yeah.
She lived to 90.
She had a hard time
Yeah.
being alone.
Yeah.
It was thank goodness for your father. And it
Yeah.
didn't help the father because it was hard on him.
A lot of traveling.
Yeah, because she was almost like afraid to be alone.
She was. Whenever the housekeeper would leave, we would either get a call or she would hit the life alert.
Yeah.
And then we'd get another call, but it would be
she
from
was very,
paramedics.
she just wasn't used to being alone. And now that I think about it, it's not easy to be alone.
No.
It isn't. I mean, especially when you used to see. We went from our house to like our husband's home. We never were. We were never alone.
Mm-hmm.
That makes a difference,
Yeah.
Well, I guess that completes our history.